So I got a warm welcome for the Russian ambassador. It's a pleasure already. Thank you for that. I have gone through the list of those who have spoken before me here. A lot of presidents, prime ministers, singers, and whatever it is, but I did not discover a single Russian speaker, or at least a speaker from Moscow. So it's a special pleasure for me then to deliver some views of what we think back to Moscow. I will speak for about 15 minutes, if you do not mind, and then I will welcome all sorts of questions. First of all, I will speak about European security architecture, dividing lines, and this was fashionable in the early 90s, of course. Then we have got Cold War, nearly Cold War, and now it is once again experts and politicians who are more serious. They are talking about it once again, about the necessity of new European architecture. This year is a very special year because it is 75th anniversary of our common victory over Nazism. And I also would like to remind you that it is victory has been ended with establishment of a security system in a Euro-Atlantic area. And the founding fathers of these security systems are three of them. It is Stalin, it is Churchill, and this is Roosevelt. And while reading Churchill, I would like to say that how many thoughts he implemented in this security system, how well it has been thought out, and it worked for quite a long time. Then Cold War has happened, as you know, and we have got 90s. The years of 90s, we were a bit idealistic during these years because we did believe that all wars are gone, that we have a permanent peace, and we can construct the real European architecture without dividing line in Europe. All will be friends, countries will be moving, people will be moving freely, trade will be done. Free trade zone and all of that stuff. So this was a good opportunity for all of us. And we have done a lot to achieve this goal, Europe without dividing lines. We removed all troops from Eastern Europe. We dramatically reduced number of our troops in the western part of Russia. We eliminated medium-range missiles. And we started to establish liaison with multilateral institutions of Europe, with the European Union and NATO. First, with the European Union, of course, it was early 90s, and we established liaison and we developed very many projects together. We worked in 4 different spaces of security, internal security, legal security, culture, and all of that. So that was quite a very serious work. We have come very close to institutionalize our relationship. We have nearly done an options of joint crisis management with the European Union because we were working already in the seas in Africa and all that stuff. And we were very close to establish visa-free movement and free trade zone with the European Union. Unfortunately, it failed. At the same time, in the beginning of 90s, and I was the first Soviet diplomat who has established liaison with NATO headquarters. I spent 10 years then in Brussels. We institutionalized our relationship with NATO. First of all, that was a founding act, then a more developed sphere of the Russian NATO Council. The idea was initially to be part of the organization, having a good liaison of it, not the membership, but the participation in decision-making process. Joint training, joint capacities, this was all on the table. And that was a very good opportunity for us to erase dividing lines between Russia and NATO. But it didn't happen, unfortunately. One more organization, 2 more organizations were instrumental in this area. One is the OSCE, And I was member to the European Security Organization, which is based in Vienna. I was ambassador to it for 4 years, and it has great potential because it unites all 57 countries. Mongolia was admitted as well over there. It unites 57 countries joining at the same table. So that's an organization which has enormous potential. And another one is the Council of Europe, which is in Strasbourg, which is dealing with humanitarian part, with legal part of all European legislation, and which makes legislation equal in all the countries, including mine. And we continue to work in this organization. But what happened later on? Unfortunately, around 2000-2003, the development has taken a different course. Some people in the West, and I guess in Washington and in some capitals, they started to believe that Russia develops too quick. It is gaining too much influence in the world and in Europe. And instead of continuing to work on the common project of erasing dividing lines and making joint European institution, European architecture, a new policy had started of containment of Russia. We didn't feel anymore that we are supported, but we felt that countries of the West are trying to push us aside and are trying to design a new dividing line which is very close to our borders. What has been done, it is, of course, in the field of the European Union, a new Eastern partnership, so-called the program of a new Eastern partnership has been launched, which dealt with all countries of the former Soviet Union except Russia. So European Union said that priorities is Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, Caucasus, Central Asia, everything but not Russians. Russians will be in the second queue, standing in the second queue. But the most detrimental to this was enlargement of NATO. Enlargement of NATO, of course, you are members of NATO, and I'm aware what this organization is doing in a positive way about the defense, less spending, and all of that. However, it was always against from the very beginning, against Russian military forces. So we could not be a part of the alliance, and it failed in the end. Enlargement during Bucharest summit in 2005, decision has been taken that Ukraine and Georgia should be in the NATO, and that was the end of the story, because these countries, they did want to be part of Europe, part of NATO, part of the European Union, and they started to run away from Russia. And they did believe really that the speed with which they are going to run away from Russia, the quicker they will be members of the European Union and NATO, which has led to the current crisis in Ukraine. Because nobody was expecting that Ukraine is going to join really the European Union. Nobody was expecting Ukraine into NATO, but aspirations were high in Kiev among the Ukrainians that the quickest they will go from Russia, the quickest they will join this union. So that was the biggest mistake that has been done in the European politics, unfortunately, I should say. Now, what is of course happening now. This is a crisis which is caused by certain mistakes that has been done in our view by politicians in the West. Probably we have made our own mistakes, and these mistakes that we did not reacted strongly sufficiently for first rounds of enlargement of NATO. For some of us, it was pretty clear that this will make no good for international politics, but some of us, President Yeltsin at that time, he did not object it seriously enough to stop this enlargement. And the more we see it, the more we understand what was wrong and what was right. Now, how to improve? how to improve the situation. Of course, there are ways and possibilities to do that. We have problems with this country, with the United Kingdom. Although it is much less at the moment, much less problems with other countries, with Germany, with France, Italy, and all the others, because they are more understanding. With the United Kingdom, we have a political problem, which you know, and if there will be questions, I will answer them immediately. But however, what we suggest to do, that in the first place, one has to stop this anti-Russian rhetorics, because Russia cannot be blamed for everything which has gone wrong in the West. You have your own problem. You have to deal it with them. We do not intervene in your elections because it doesn't make any sense for us to do that. It is impossible for us to influence it, and on the other hand, we have no interest in intervening into that. And of course, we have to think alike about the future. We have a lot of common challenges. Terrorism, what has happened the other day here in London, it is terrible, of course. And we are asking other countries and capitals, just let us do the threat of terrorism together. We are fighting terrorism in Syria, and we have a success because at the moment when we have started this campaign, terrorism in Syria, ISIL, or Daesh, as they're calling it right now, it was gaining about 90% of terrain. Right now, 90% of terrain is under the auspices of the government, and ISIL has only 10% of it, and we continue to move with that. And of course, we should start a new kind of dialogue, because in some countries, for instance, President Macron has already announced that he is prepared to start a new dialogue with Russia about new European architecture, which is badly needed now. Others are not yet, but we hope that a time will come of a new thinking about. Sanctions has been imposed on us, that is true, but sanctions did not lead to a change of political course of Russia, and sanctions only strengthened our economy because we are learning how to live on our own, how to be independent from the foreign trade, how to be independent on agriculture, on production, on everything. So. Sometimes Financial Times, by the way, has published a good articles by a number of experts a couple of days ago, and experts were of the same opinions that sanctions are only doing good for Russia because it is strengthening its economy, it becomes less dependent on dollar and euro, it develops its ruble activity and its valuta with the other countries. But they should be removed because they are damaging normal relationship with the other countries. And after that, and I hope that the new leadership of the European Union and United Kingdom will stay at least for 1 year in this transition period together with the politics of the European Union. I hope that it will be brighter days and brighter time. So organizers asked me to finish up in 15 minutes. I'm finishing in 15 minutes. Thank you. Please, questions.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. I wanted to start by asking, upon your appointment to the role as ambassador to the UK in November last year, you said that you wanted to improve relations between Russia and the UK. What steps have you taken towards doing this so far, and how do you hope to see this relationship evolve over the next year?
That's a good question. Frankly speaking, I did not achieve much because I'm here only for 2 months, and out of these 2 months, it was a big part of holidays, first in the United Kingdom and second in my country. So activities just restarted in the middle of January. But anyway, our first priority, and this is together with Barnett, who is now ambassador in our United Kingdom ambassador in Moscow, what we decided to do together is to re-establish normal work of our embassies. But you know that they have been halved, nearly 23 diplomats from each side has been fired after the crisis, and we need a re-establishment of normal functioning. So this is the first priority. Second is, of course, that we have to think also together with your ambassador in Moscow what to do with the new modalities of Britain being in the world, because we have different treaties. UK is connected with the European Union by 700 agreements of different sides, although they are saying here it's 150, but it is still 700. And some of these agreements, they are also connecting Russia and European Union. So how about Russia and United Kingdom? Then we have to talk with your ministries and agencies what we should do in this case, which new agreement we should come together, or which we have to abolish. So this is a new settlement of agreement. So it's a second priority, of course. And the rest is a part of politics. I should say that in humanitarian, cultural, educational spheres, everything goes all right. Lots of exchanges of concerts, of musicians, of students as well, and all of that. This part of it goes pretty well.
And following on from that, what are the biggest challenges you think Russia will face in the next decade on the global stage? And how do you see yourself and the country as a whole responding to them?
Well, I think it is very, very simple. We are a normal country, and we are facing, as other countries, challenges. Some I have enumerated, but important is that we feel that the world is becoming different. Leaders are becoming different, and it is much less predictable than before. Perhaps a decade ago we could have predicted what's going to be in the future. Right now, you cannot predict what's going to happen in the Middle East, what's going to happen in Syria, because there is a wide gray zone outside Europe, which englobes North of Africa, Middle East, countries that have lost stability over there, and we have to deal with these issues. That is why it's a big question. It's a very serious question, because what is now a very popular, probably you have heard it, it is an issue which is called a rules-based order. What is it? It is being pronounced by some politicians without understanding what is it. Because we all know, and you are students, so you know that international order, international law, this is a basis of international relationship. But what is it? Rules-based order. It's a different thing, because it divides the world in two parts. One part is establishing rules, and the other part has to obey to these rules. Otherwise, this other part will be sanctioned, will be punished, or will be brought into the corner. So one has to overcome this concept and to come back to basics. Let's use international law as a fundamental thing in this world. And this is a real multilateralism. So this is not an ideology, but we have come to that. It's a big challenge as well. So to come back to basics, to come back to international order on the basis of international law.
You've also served as the Deputy Permanent Representative of Russia to NATO, as well as the representative to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. In light of nationalism and authoritarianism gaining momentum within Europe and the rest of the world, what do you think the future of global cooperation will look like for the 2020s?
No, it's a very general question, I should say. I think I partly have given an answer to that. But as you see, the world is developing in a sort of a spiral way. So we, even during last century, during the 19th century, beginning of this one, we have gone twice through the hot wars, and we have gone twice through the Cold War. The development is that these conflicts, which are involving many countries and of different systems, they are becoming less acute. What is important that we do not have now ideological differences with your country and with the countries of Europe. We do not have territorial disputes. We do not have big problems in the trade, which leads us to the war. So conflicts are becoming less and less. So the point is, of course, this is not the end of the story, the end of history, like Fukuyama has described it, but it is still an important thing how we are going to live in the world. I have provided you with an example when Churchill, Stalin, and Truman has invented basics for this part for transatlantic relationship after war. I hope that the serious leaders will invent new basics for the current world. My president, President Putin, has come recently with an initiative that heads of states, of members of Security Council, it means United States, China, Russia, UK, and France will come together probably this summer and will rethink what should be done in current situation just to stabilize the world and to stabilize international politics.
Moving on to your personal career, you began a career in diplomacy in 1979. How have you seen the importance of diplomacy evolve on the world stage over 40 years? And what do you think its role will change to become in the next 10 years?
A very general question, of course, it is, yes, I'm doing diplomacy for 40 years, initially as a Soviet diplomat, then Russian diplomat. Our ministry is not very big, it is about 3,500 people, it is not comparable with the United States. But in my country, it is believed that we are doing quite a lot for our country. So military people has to defend country, their own countries, and diplomats have to re-establish contacts, has to develop concepts, have to explain politics. Diplomacy is very versatile in every country and in multilateral organization. Those of you who are going to join diplomatic service in the future of some countries, UK or the others, it is interesting, I should say. It is interesting, it is extremely important for defense of interests of your country.
And what are the biggest lessons in diplomacy that you've learned over the course of your career?
As I said before, that we should have reacted to NATO expansion much more serious about enlargement of NATO. This is one, and second, that we had a lot of illusions in the beginning of 90s that we can construct European security just on the basis of two institutions, European Union and NATO. That was an illusion, unfortunately, because these two unions, they are uniting just groups of the country. They are not spread across the whole Euro-Atlantic area organizations. And they are now ignoring, unfortunately, integration projects on the other side of Eurasia, like Eurasian Union, like Shanghai Organization, which englobes Russia, China, and many Central Asian countries. And this is what has happened. It should not be ignored. Relations should be installed and launched between integration units. This is much more important. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then my final question before moving on to the audience is I wanted to ask about the accusations that Russia has faced in both the UK and the US regarding involvement in and interference in political elections. How do you respond to these accusations?
Well, I heard this before, of course. Many times, journalists like this question also very many times. We are not only accused about only these two cases. They say, when I heard that we are being involved in the case in elections in Germany, we are just asking, do you imagine which party we are supposed to support? Because there is no answer. They are all, for us, they are all alike. It doesn't make any case. On the other side, once we have been accused in Spain that we are supporting this movement of separatists, this is nonsense. Absolutely, there is nothing for us in it. These kind of slogans are being used by politicians, that those who are losing their cases, Like Democrats, they need some explanation, some outside explanation, like Democrats in the United States. I mean, when Republicans were tending to vote, Democrats were losing. They need some explanation, of course, just to save the face on it. So they invented Russia to blame. This is, of course, for us it is funny. We do not believe it. Some people do believe it. Some people do believe in cyber attacks. But in this world, you perfectly are aware that you can attribute cyber attack to anybody about anything in this world. Let's not name the names, but that's the case of life, of course. It's, we have a lot of cyber attacks in our own country as well, so on the ministry, on banks, and all of that, but we do not make a fuss about that. So, as I said, perhaps, I do not exclude, there are some private enterprises, wherever it is in China or wherever it is, that are trying to influence some people over there. But just spreading advertisement, spreading anecdotes or jokes or slogans, you are not going to influence seriously this organization. You are not going to electorate, I mean. My embassy here, it counts about 40 diplomats. We have also about 10 journalists here. Do you believe we really can influence electorate here in the United Kingdom? This is nonsense, of course.
Sorry, just to stay on that for another question. There are a lot of people, as you said, who do strongly believe that Russia did influence these elections and who do cite evidence in this. How would you respond to the people who point to, for example, specific social media accounts that were created by the Russian government to influence via social media the US elections in 2016?
Russian government and the robots, you call it, or whatever, some companies which do exist, some medias, they have nothing to do altogether. So we have a government and we have independent media on the one hand. People, of course, can believe whatever it is. They say that a kind of a Prigozhin companies that does exist in St. Petersburg. Yes, I heard about that. Yes, we do have a person whose name is Prigozhin, but I do not believe that he can influence elections in the United States and damage the Democratic Party.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions from the audience now. So if you have a question, please raise your hand in the air, wait for the microphone to come to you, and stand up while asking your question. Could we start with the hand in the first row, please?
Hi, my name is Dina Ramadan. I'm from Syria. And my question is about the policies of Russia towards Syria. Russia based its intervention into the Syria on the rhetoric that it's fighting terrorists and helping people against terrorist attacks.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Yeah. Russia based its rhetoric on intervention in Syria on the basis that it's fighting the terrorists and terrorist organization. How does that make sense in the case of Idlib, where Russia is doing the terrorist attack by bombarding Syrian civilians and displacing over 1 million people from the province of Idlib, just from mid of January till February? There were more than 350,000 people displaced from these province of Idlib. So how would you say that we are fighting terrorists while you are acting as terrorists in Syria? Thank you.
Okay. Our goal in Syria is very simple. Syria has been under very serious attack by terrorists, I mean ISIL or Daesh, and associate organizations, Nusra and the others. Initially, 5 years ago, it was in ruins totally. A coalition of forces has been established by the United States, ostensibly a coalition of forces, some about 90 countries, but they tried to cope with it, but they have done nothing, in fact. When we have sent over there some of our air forces, not ground forces, air forces, just to support what Syrian government is supposed to deal with the terrorists. It really helps because the situation was vague. We assisted Syrian forces from the air to conquer lost territories, that they have lost it to the real terrorists. And by now, after 2 years of very serious efforts, Syrian forces, Syrian army on the ground and with the assistance of the Russian air forces, Syrian army has gained about 90% of the terrain. And terrorists, all the terrorists are now, they are either vanishing from the country or they are being beaten over there, but some of them has concentrated in the area that is called Idlib, that is true, and they do have about 30,000 of terrorists. It's a problem. It's a big problem for us. It's a big problem for Syrian forces, and it is as well a big problem for Turks, because Turks are also involved in this situation, and they are assisting as well to fight against terrorism over there. So what to do? It is a pretty big area which is populated by several thousand of Syrians, but it is also dominated by the terrorists. We tried and we concluded agreement with the Turkish government, with the Turkish president, how to deal with that. So Turkish government installed around Idlib area observation posts in order to keep these terrorists inside Idlib, not to allow them to spread around, not to go to Libya, which they would like very much to do, and they continue to do that. However, in return, Turkish government promised to separate terrorists from normal opposition which does not fight, which do not want to fight against authorities, which is peaceful. This separation is not a success, unfortunately, because terrorists, they still continue to attack forces. They are also providing blows against Russian, the only Russian base which is on the seaside of Syria. They are sending drones. They are launching missiles as well. So that's a problem. And Syrians have started to push these terrorists, start to gain some terrains. Stories that we are bombing hospitals, they are fake. They are totally fake. No one is trying to bomb hospitals. Of course, you can show whatever it is. Collateral damage does exist when a coalition was, look what has happened in Massoud when coalition bombed it and Americans has bombed it, that is in Iraq, bombed it totally and at all. So these stories are fake. This is not deliberate. Perhaps some collateral damage happened, but it is under control. But we have either we deal with this nest of the terrorists, or they will go all around other countries. Libya, they will return to Caucasus. They will go to the other countries, and they continue to spread all around. So the purpose is to finish up with this nest of terrorists. And thank you for your question.
Thank you. Could we go to the hand in the back row?
Thank you very much for your talk. I'd be really interested to know more about what it's like personally on the side of your profession. Given that some of your predecessors here as ambassador have had to deal with public relations fiascos like the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko and the attacks in Salisbury, what is it like for you personally, and how do you prepare professionally for a position in which there's a history of antagonism between these two nations and a high likelihood that during your tenure here, you might have to deal with situations that no normal diplomat has to?
It's a lot of echoes, and I don't hear pretty well. Perhaps I did not got all the words of what you have said, but I would like to point out that the history of relationship between Russia and Britain counts 450 years. We exchanged ambassadors, if I am not mistaken, around 1663. I mean, the 17th century, so very long away. So it was always, and it has never been equal. So it has, there were ups and downs in this relationship very often. If you will take up a history of the 20th century or even 19th century, so there was several episodes when some of stories were took very emotional, and in 1920s, for instance, late 20s, Britain decided to cut off relationship with the Soviet Russia because of a false letter that has been a famous Zinoviev letter that was a complete fake. So for and it was, by the way, Labour government who decided to stop relationship. However, after 3 years of a cool down, they themselves decided to re-establish this relationship. You mentioned these stories of Litvinenko and Skripal. Yes, they do exist. It is a very emotional reaction to some event. We still are not aware what happened with Skripal. Believe me, frankly. And as ambassadors, we are asking for information. If you would like us to know about that, if Britain would like to have a dialogue about what has happened, please reveal us what is your information in your disposal, and if you would like a cooperation, we are prepared to cooperate about this. However, the response to our letters sent to the Foreign Affairs, to the governmental office requesting this information, they are received with silence. We do not get responses. But at any stage, we will be prepared to cooperate with that.
Could we go to the hand in the pink top?
My question is about your diplomatic career. Actually, we know that there are some stereotypes towards Russian people as well as towards Russian diplomats. For example, 2 decades or 3 decades ago, when we watched the Hollywood films, or especially the James Bond series, Russian people were usually described as strong and masculine, and the Russian diplomats were always described as spies. Especially the beautiful girls and the handsome boys.
I hear all the Russian people was.
So, do you find is it difficult to work in the country with political bias towards your country?
Let us put it like that. In this country, the Russian diaspora is about, we counted from 100,000 to 200,000 of people. It's a lot of people. And I'm in this small period of time when I'm here, I'm just visiting different towns and cities. I was in Manchester recently, in Leeds, and the others, and everywhere I'm meeting people, Russian-speaking people, whether they are real Russians or all they just have an origin, excuse me, I will switch it off, or they are just Russian by origin, and I did not discover any complaint that their daily life is aggravated by biased attitude. That is not true. If you will see how many artists are performing in UK, you will be also interesting. So in the field of culture, in the field of education, we have many students here. We have quite a lot of scientific ties and all the others. So on the level of humanitarian liaison, it goes pretty well. Daily life is going pretty well. I talk to a lot of normal and ordinary people here in England, and I did not discover any biased attitude. Some biased attitude exists, well, everywhere. So France, Germany, for instance, let us talk, I don't know, would like to put other, Belgium and the Netherlands, and has a long story of that. But if some politicians do believe that they have a biased attitude towards my country, it's their own problem. They are dealing with it. We have had a liaison, as I said, for centuries, of course, also on the level of royal families. And do believe me that this liaison is much stronger than some episodes, some political episodes in bilateral sphere. If I answered your question, which
And could we go to the hand right next to you?
My name is Christopher Mpanga, and I'm a law student at Oxford Brookes University. I come from Uganda. My question is about, so we've seen the Chinese lately taking a lot of interest in Africa. We have seen Russia, conducting a conference, with African leaders.
Right.
So my question is, what is Russia's particular interest and role in Africa lately? Because in the past, the most, popular thing we've had is Russia supplying guns to Africa and to a country like Uganda. So yeah, that's my particular question. What is Russia's role?
What Russia is doing? Supplying what?
Like guns and weapons, to
Gangs
Africa.
and weapons.
Yeah, guns, weapons in the past. But my particular question is, what is Russia's strategy or interest in Africa lately? Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
well, instead of gangs, you'd better just try to get information how many students from Africa are learning, are studying in Russia, in Moscow, and in different other cities. They are numerous, believe me. And I'm living next to Moscow State University, very close to it, and I see a lot of people from Africa that are studying, doing studies over there. The Chinese are, of course, more numerous over there, do believe me. Yes, we did have a Russia-African summit recently, as well as United Kingdom has done recently UK-African summit, as China is doing on a regular basis Africa-China summit. And all of that is about business opportunities. We have old friends in different countries of Africa. As perhaps you know, perhaps not, but we have built huge industries in Egypt, in Angola, in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, and in many. That happened in 60s. When USSR was very resourceful and was capable to spend money all across Africa for huge industrial projects. Just try to look back what has happened before. And after that, there was a period of time when we got much less resources than before. Right now, we are forceful enough to deal with difficulties in some countries in Africa, and we are involving them into cooperation, and that is what the same is being done by the United Kingdom. Of course, we cannot compare our possibilities of investing in Africa with what China is doing. They are much more moderate, I would say, but it's about 100. I'm not sure about the ciphers, but we are trying, believe me, to invest more in Africa to develop that. We are doing a lot of in development field, in the field of education, as I said, in the field of health and all the others, because we see the potential problem if not all of us will help Africa to make it better, to develop itself quicker, then we shall have a huge immigration problem. Okay?
Could we go to the hand in the red?
Thank you for being here. I'm sorry to drag this back to the unpleasant business of Idlib that we've already heard of, but just today, actually, earlier today, President Erdogan has shown his disapproval of Turkish soldiers being killed by Syrian soldiers, and has announced that there will be no further ground given to Syrian forces. Now, do you think that the period of cooperation and good weather with Turkey in Syria, despite supporting differing sides in the civil war, has come to an end? And if not, how do you think that Turkey-Russia relations can be maintained?
In the 19th century, we have had about 5 or 6 wars with Turkey. And yeah, that's a good example of our relationship. So that's a very bloody war, I should say. And very serious war, yes, for territories and all that stuff. In the recent years, so it is also up and downs, and I won't say that it is all in balance. But in the recent years, we have found that in many areas, relationship with Turkey is on balance, and it meets. It is not against someone. It is just we have several similar cases, like it is in Syria, because Turkey is interested to finalize the issue of fighting against terrorists in Syria, as well as us. and to maintain country, Syria, a unique and stable. In other fields, I'll say we have common interest in providing gas and oil to Turkey. We have a lot of to do in the field of economics because Turkey is one of the major supplier of fruits and vegetables. Turkey is a good builder of houses and other entities in my country. So there are quite a number of different firms and enterprises that are working on our soil, and vice versa. We continue to do that. Your question is also relevant, of course, to the issue of weapon selling to Turkey. Yes, we are doing it because they are asking us to sell to them the weapon, nothing else, and they need it. And they're asking us, and of course, they could be bound by NATO discipline, but still, if there is a demand, so there is a seller, there is a buyer. So just like that. What will happen in the future? It is unpredictable, but we have a lot in common because Turkey has been rejected relations, trying to establish relations with the European Union. Turkey has got a rejection. By the way, it is an interesting fact that when, by the time of Brexit, Turkey has prepared 8 agreements, so-called continuation agreements with the European Union, because many countries are now trying to establish this continuity or continuation agreements of them. All these agreements has been rejected by the United Kingdom because United Kingdom, it is not a priority for UK. UK decided to get agreements with Japan, with Switzerland, with immediate neighbors, and with Commonwealth, of course, of it, but not with that. So this is lots of points we have now in common with Turkey. Future will be pragmatic, of course, as well. Mm-hmm.
Could we go to the hand right behind you?
Thank you. My name is Samuel. I'm studying social policy evaluation, and my question concerns a law that was signed in December by President Putin. And the law requires every technical device, a computer, smartphone, and smart TVs, starting this summer, to have a pre-installed app by Russian developers. And my question is, what is the primary aim of this law? And the second question is, what do you respond to critiques saying that this is a threat to individual freedom and a first step to a surveillance state?
I never heard about this law. In fact, if you mean Apple telephones and Apple applications that I'm using both here and back in Moscow, Apple as such, and now I have the 11th model, back in Moscow the 8th one. There is no such a law. It's a kind of a mistake on it. Guys, do you understand what it is? Okay. Yeah. Now I understand what you are saying. So this is. This is not. Well, it's a general tendency because all providers are now situated on the territory of the United States. It means that they, if they like, they can read whatever it is, any traffic back. If you remember the scandal with the Chancellor Merkel, when it has been discovered that all her telephone conversation has been listened by Washington authorities over there. Of course, it is. So we do not want to be in a situation that all our traffic, also which is secret traffic, will be listened in Washington. That is why we are trying to install our own credit cards as well as our own providers, especially for the governmental organization, for internal intergovernmental traffic.
And what is your, thank you, and what is your response to the critique saying that this is a first step to surveillance state?
First step to what?
Surveillance state, that we can survey people and track their traffic.
Surveillance? No, not at all. The answer is simple, no.
Let's move to another question. Could we go to the hand over there?
In light of the recent ban against Russia by the World Anti-Doping Organization from competing in the 2020 Olympics, I'm curious what actions Russia is taking to attempt to reestablish its credibility in the international sporting community so that it can sort of participate in international sport going forward.
Yeah, it's a big problem. You're right for us. Yes, I'm not trying to defend those who are using drugs in the field of sport. And if such cases has been revealed, of course, we have to fight that. I'm afraid that there was a lot of a kind of an underground problem which has not been revealed earlier for that. And now, of course, we need to favor clean sport and to make a new generation of athletes which do not use at all anything what is forbidden. But at the same time, what is needed is to have a better notion of what is forbidden, what is not, what can be used by the sportsmen and what is not, because there was a not sufficient understanding and notion among our sportsmen about the rules that being applied in this area. And I think that the company that has started, of course, it is very damaging for the sportsmen that has now fallen under the prohibition. And what is also needed for us, it is a new specialists that are specializing themselves in the law of sports, which we did not have at all. That those who can defend a sportsman, or that to prove his innocence, or to prove to save him from the prosecution. So it's quite a new breed for us. This did not existed before.
Thank you. And could we go to the hand over there for our final question?
My name's Nicholas Silva. I work with the United Nations. And my question is, how would you categorize the current relationship between Great Britain and Russia?
No, it looks like that I just talked a lot about that. Would you like me to repeat it from the beginning? Which part of my speech you would like to to repeat? Well, let us put it just as simple as an egg. We are prepared to continue normal relationship with Great Britain as it existed before. We do not have objective differences like ideology, territorial disputes, trade disputes, or whatever it is. But there is a subjective problem, and this subjective problem, in philosophical terms, if you continue to learn Marxist philosophy, of course. So this subjective problem lays on the field of the United Kingdom. This morning I have heard a phrase from some diplomat from a foreign office that if Russia would like to normalize the relationship with the United Kingdom, so she should do first stop annexing Crimea, leave Syria, and then make pardon for Skripal issues. Of course, anyone will understand that we will not leave Crimea because it will be against the will of 2 million people that are living over there. We are not leave Syria because this is unfinished business and we have to finalize a fight against terrorism. As for Skripals, I cannot explain anymore what I tried to explain to you.
We do have time for one final question. Could we go to the hand here?
Andrey Vladimirovich, thank you so much for coming here. My name is Konstantin Lebedev, and I'm a Russian student in Oxford. So my final question, I would like it to be easy, but it's going to be a bit personal. I hope that you don't mind it. What was your motivation? What was your reasons to become a diplomat? In your biography, I read that your parents were diplomats as well. Maybe during you was a kid or during your school years when you was a schoolboy, you've been to a lot of foreign countries, or maybe you even saw some of foreign diplomats in your house. Could you please tell a little bit about your personal experience, about your personal motivation? Thank you so much.
This is a very unbiased question, that's all right. You got it. Well, the reason is very simple, I would say, because my parents were diplomats. The parents of my wife were also diplomats, and all her family were diplomats. But I was trained as a journalist, in fact, in MGIMO. But when time has come to choose the profession, well, I like it. I did not have a lot of motivation about fighting for peace or whatever it is, but it's an interesting profession. And I was part of my family when my father served in Paris as a counselor. And by the way, when I have graduated from the university, my father was minister counselor in this country in early 80s in the United Kingdom. And he has made a book about the United Kingdom. This book has been published by wide release, I should say. And when I reread it once again before coming here, I have discovered that not much has changed in the United Kingdom 40 years after this book has been published. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and please join me in thanking the ambassador for coming here today.